Hello and welcome to the Southbound Sports Show. I'm your host, Richie Leahy, here with my co-host, Maddie B. I know we normally start off with NFL stuff, but we had such a big weekend in college football that I'm going to flip it. Just to give you a little preview, though, for those that have checked in and you want to scrub, Steelers did stay alive. I think they needed that win against the Ravens to move on. A big two-point conversion decision. The Ravens had some devastating injury news, but we'll be getting into that later. We have to celebrate Pitt, starting with the ACC today, which is normally a complete reversal because I think we normally do them last. The ACC finally has a new champion, Matt, and it's not Florida State. If you would have told me, like, hey, Clemson, and which I didn't even realize that Clemson has won it so many years in a row. Like, I did a search because I'm like, hey, I think Florida State won it previously. So Clemson won it in 2011. I think that was the year they got killed by West Virginia, if I'm not mistaken, in the Orange Bowl. And I didn't even know that they won it then. Like, I thought Georgia Tech won it around that time, but I guess that might have been 2009. It says vacated. Yeah, that was Georgia Tech's vacated or whatever the hell. I can't even talk. Championship because of infractions that they lost to Iowa that year, I think, in the Orange Bowl or whatever bowl it was. Then it's been Virginia Tech and Florida State pretty much ever since. Florida State won 3 in a row from 2012 to 14, and then it's been Clemson for 6 years in a row. So I thought there was at least one other team mixed in. Like, I knew they played Miami. Notre Dame was in for that 1.5 year, which, I mean, in terms of conference champions, Notre Dame is 0 for whatever. They're the worst record of all time. Never winning a conference championship. I know they played in the game, but holy hell. Maybe that's why they're staying independent. What do you think on Pitt getting it done?
Well, if there was ever a year for them to get it done, this was the year to do it. With a heavy senior-laden team and a veteran group that was basically returning almost everybody that was key to them, it made sense that it was definitely win now philosophy. So I was actually surprised that they were able to pull it off, because typically you have these Pitt teams that they play to the competition. You know, they'll play tough against a Clemson, they'll play tough when Miami's ranked, and then they lose to directional Michigan for no reason. And it just, those are the games that are frustrating, because it's like there's no reason for them to lose the way that they do. And you've heard the comparison before. Rooting for Pitt's like being in an abusive relationship, because you just keep thinking, oh, they're going to fix it this time, and then they let you down and break your heart. So I was pleased that they were able to finish it off and get one more ACC championship than Miami.
Well, so that's what I was going to bring up. Pitt has been independent for a long part of their history too. I think the first conference they were in was the Big East in 1991. Looking at their history here, they have 3 conference championships, 2 division titles. I thought they had a couple more in the Big East, but realistically, I guess it was all Miami for the most part. But then Miami left. Like, Pitt was there for another 10 years, and they only won. That's probably when they won there too, 2004 and 2010. I guess the rest were West Virginia. I'm probably wrong. Cincinnati might even been in there. But I was shocked that they've already had 2 division titles, which I knew that they had the other one. And in terms of like ACC, some of these schools, if you're looking just in football and their championships, it's like some of the schools here, they're so low on the list, it's almost embarrassing that Pitt can come in and a team not even known for winning the conference, they only had 2 prior, like I mentioned, they're able to get it done. Wake Forest has 2 total, and they've been in the ACC probably forever. Virginia Tech has 4. Some of the other ACC schools that have been there forever, Georgia Tech, 2, Virginia, 2. If Pitt wins one more, they're ahead of them. And then, like, the Miami, like you mentioned, Miami, Notre Dame, Syracuse, Louisville, and Boston College, they'll have none. So from that crop of Big East schools, you would think, if you go back to like the 90s and you say, hey, Miami, Pitt, and they're all going to join the ACC, I highly doubt people wouldn't guess. Maybe Virginia Tech having 4, they might guess that one. But I think most people would have said Miami. And Miami, I think that might have spurred them, Matt, because they made some crazy moves over the weekend. You want to give your thoughts first, because I know that's a big rival of yours.
It was great to watch that it wasn't happening to us. It's one of those, like, it in some ways was kind of cringeworthy, because I can remember what it was like not that long ago, where you're looking for another coach and you're trying to figure out where pieces are going to land, and you have people that are across the board in other conferences moving pieces, and to start to see, all right, well, you had some of the bigger names. Lincoln Riley moved on. Ogeron was fired. Brian Kelly moves in. Like, there's some of the top schools, or supposed top schools, are getting the guy that they want. And it's like, if you start taking this, start peeling some of these layers off, what are you left with? You have Florida that took a step back, hiring Napier away from Louisiana. But they go after Cristobal. But the weird thing with it is that they go after him while at the same time, like, not doing anything with Diaz. So you basically set, like, the most awkward situation where, like, you have 2 head coaches before making a decision.
Well, see, that's where I don't even know if people realized what was happening. Because, I mean, like, we had Miami friends that thought that with Diaz there, they were just bringing Cristobal in as an AD, which kind of made sense, because the reason he looked for a move, supposedly, I don't know how true this is, but I guess his mother lives in Florida and she's sick. So, like, if you're a football coach, I didn't think, like, oh, if that's the reason, yeah, AD makes sense, because if you're a football coach and something happens, you're not going to just be able to, like, leave wherever you're flying. The ADs probably have a little bit more leeway there. So I thought, oh, he's doing like a Chris Peterson maybe, where he's stepping back, taking time with the family, which I thought was weird when Peterson did it, but maybe not. Then Diaz is still hired, and then they're going through negotiations. So I'm like, oh, this is a sneaky move. Like, they're going to bring him in. I don't even know how much, like, bringing a football coach in as an AD, that might help with recruiting. I mean, like, maybe you just keep him on as an assistant, but no. They're like, no, he's going to be the coach now. And I'm like, what a shock. Like, such a weird move. And you brought up Napier. Napier has a stellar record. Like, I know some people were, like, laughing because he only had, like, oh, he might suck. But his record overall is 40-12. Like, I'm pretty sure Cristobal's just above 500 as a head coach. And so, like, in terms of, like, just potential, because, like, if you remember, like, Urban Meyer came in with the same type of record at Florida, where he was unstoppable at Utah. I know Utah's a little bit bigger than Louisiana, but back then it wasn't in the Pac-12. Like, were they in the Mountain West? I don't even remember.
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't what they were now. And then that was their guy. They didn't really focus on anyone else. So I'm interested to see how that pans out, because I think that they wanted to get a guy like that. They tried it with Mullen, where you get a coach from another Power 5 school that has success. Why not go back to what worked with Urban Meyer? Get a guy that's just been coaching lights out. I mean, hell, it worked out with Notre Dame and Brian Kelly until he left. Luke Fickell, which we'll get into here in a little bit, like he was a name that was kind of floated around for a lot of these head coaching jobs, but now they're in the playoffs, so who knows if some of the other openings that were out there. The other ACC move then, the big one, Miami then hires Clemson's athletic director to come down. So you're getting a whole new regime change, and I wonder how much, like, he was involved with the Cristobal thing, because they waited. Apparently, Monday morning, they didn't have a decision, and so they gave him, like, an ultimatum. I don't know if you saw that version, like, as it was going live, because I was very interested, because I'm like, this is a train wreck. It didn't last as long. The most fun I ever had on the show was the Groomers and Tennessee, and let's be honest, we got pretty popular there with our coverage of it, and even have a hardcore part of the fan base that still talks trash on us over John Gruden to this day, which is years ago. So I'm like, oh, please, Miami, let this last like a week or two because that would be so much fun to talk about on the show. But they got it done. Cristobal brings in. I saw ESPN did a segment and they were like, well, Miami really wanted him because he's Cuban. And the first thought I had was, I didn't even know he was Cuban. How many casual fans would know that? But maybe they do. I don't know. And then Diaz, of course, he was fired after, which I don't know how their contracts are set up, but I'm sure he's getting the full buyout now. Because you can't just hire someone else and then be like, oh, yeah, we were firing you, though, remember? For cause. Like, no, that's not going to work out. A lot of people are saying that it's karma, though, because of the way he left Temple. And I don't know about that.
Yeah.
But maybe.
I think there's a little bit of karma coming back, but at the same time, I think you look at Cristobal, he was fired at FIU. So, like, he couldn't win at Florida International and landed on his feet in Oregon and found his way back to Florida. So, I think while if you're a Miami fan and you're clinging to hope that it pans out, it's a risky proposition. I mean, and speaking of athletic directors, Florida State's athletic director was resigning, and they could be potentially signing Louisville's AD.
Really?
Yes.
Why would they want him?
Because he has connections to Florida State.
Not because of success. Clemson, he basically is a successful school now. Miami taking him, I think, would be a really good grab. Louisville, I don't know. Weren't they in the middle of a bunch of scandals?
They got him. They navigated through that was post scandal.
So speaking of scandals, though, so I don't forget, Joe Brady now, there's mutual interest between him and Miami because it was rumored that he might go back to LSU. He said that he hated recruiting. No NFL team's going to touch him, though, because he was fired. And so he was looking at it, and I mean, like the scandals, he's still tied with LSU. So they were saying that there's no way LSU could hire him back. They can't like fire Coach O for the same scandals and then bring in other coaches that were there at the same time. So that might be another thing because everyone says Joe Brady was the secret behind LSU's offense that year. Who knows?
Which absolutely means that it would make sense to bring him back.
Well, who knows? Because they went Brian Kelly. Brian Kelly is not going to let... Actually, I don't even know what he does. He flips out, lets student interns die, or whatever they're doing with their filming of practices. So, who knows, Matt? I'm waiting for that hire of any of them. I don't know if it's a sure thing. Maybe just bringing back Joe Brady would have been a better deal. But who knows? If he hates recruiting, I don't know how much that's going to help Miami. But, I mean, going back to the AD stuff, Louisville has been pretty successful. I don't know how good their AD is, but I don't think ADs matter that much. But for Miami, it 100% will matter. Because Clemson used to not get money.
But wait a minute, because when you look at what the athletic director is going to do, everything is hinging around the ability to produce facilities and do the upgrades.
Get money.
And it matters. It matters until you don't have it.
Well, Miami, one of their things that came out that boosters were throwing money if they were able to get both of them. And so I know like the promise of money sounds good, but I want to see what actually happens. Because like someone had even said that they were talking about possibly a new on-campus stadium, and I was like, does that really matter? Maybe it does for recruiting, but they're a small school. They didn't fill the one they're in now. So like, I mean, same with like Pitt. Everyone's like, well, if they have a small stadium on campus, it might be a better crowd. Like, yeah, that might be true, but is it really going to help recruiting? A smaller stadium? Because like you can go down to Penn State right down the road, and then you're in 100,000. Same with like going from Miami, like, hey, here's our little stadium. Oh, Florida State and Florida's are so much bigger though, but ignore them. Come to Miami.
I've always been one that if you win, and Miami has proven over the years that they've been playing in other stadiums and were able to win national championships. So if you have the recruits and you have the coaching, the winning will take care of itself. But you don't necessarily need that stadium. But I do think in some cases it may be beneficial. And I think when you look at a program like Pitt, that's one of the things that they'll negatively recruit against you. Like if you consider Penn State a rival,
I would say it would be more West Virginia that was doing it.
But if you even to say West Virginia, I wouldn't say that their stadium's housing. They're not having record crowds at their stadium.
It's usually packed though. I think 50 probably 50 something.
That's probably fair to say. But when you pack 50 compared to you have seating for 80, 90,000, and
Pitt does, the Steelers Stadium only seats 60 something, I think. So, and it's half empty. So, like, what would they build? A 30,000? I mean, I guess you'd build a 40 or 50 like West Virginia, but you still have the same problem. Is it going to be filled? I mean, I guess you could fill it if you let students come in for free. I mean, then if it's right on campus, it might be something for them to do in tailgate. And maybe right, win a couple ACC championships. They're in the Coastal. And the Coastal, as we know, is set up to be there for the taking.
Well, and if you have that, and like you can create that environment with more fans there. And then whether
DJs.
I guess you could probably do it with DJs too. But,
well, I only bring that up because I went to the Big Ten ACC Challenge down here. I went to see Michigan lose to UNC again. One year, because they always match them up in the ACC Big Ten Challenge. Never in Michigan, though. Like UNC, I don't think it ever goes there. Michigan will play like, we'll get a Boston College or someone at home. But then when they're on the road, they'll get like UNC. It's like, why not Duke? Went to see Coach K in his last year. That would have been nice. But the one thing that I don't remember being last time, and maybe it was their last time, they had a hype man do the entire thing. Like he was like the MC. He came out, he announced the players, and I thought, like, is this like some type of like celebrity? Like, who is this guy? And then I'm like, he's just the MC. He was like queuing the DJs up. He was doing like not the celebrations, but like the contest, where it's like, hey, come on down for a half-court shot or whatever. And he was like doing all that. He was singing, leading chants, which the one thing I will say, the Tar Heels chant, where half the stadium says tar and then everyone says heels, no idea what they were saying. That has to be one of the least intimidating cheers I've ever heard. I'm like, what are they chanting? Because, like, I'm used to Michigan's Go Blue. You have the hard consonants at the start. You know what they're doing. Heels, it was like, I thought they were saying Go Heels, but it was like the most Southern draw version of that. And then people were like, no, they're saying Tar Heels. I'm like, oh, I guess that makes more sense. But I don't know why you guys have this MC down here leading the chant. And maybe I just don't go to that many basketball games. I don't know. I guess you wouldn't see that on TV. But that's my ACC story for the week. You could do that. If they had a hype man at Pitt, bring in a hype man. That's what they need. Who's a famous Pittsburgh guy? Bret Michaels?
There you go.
Poison, I know he's at the Steeler game. I only bring him up because he was at one of the Steeler games recently, wasn't he? He was like down on the field with someone. I forget which game that was. I don't know. But I guess you got to win. Like you're saying, you're right. You got to win. If you build the stadium and you don't win, no one's going to come. Maybe you can fill it with students, which I did wonder, like some of these schools, you have the small fan base. Like UNC right now, you see a lot of their football games. They were, predicted to be in the top 10? And I'm talking about football now, not basketball again. Their stadium's half empty all the time. Same with Duke. It's like, why sell student tickets then? Just let students in for free to sit in the upper deck.
Well, I thought of this too. Like, if Pitt still practices at the UPMC complex, they're still able to use that time. They're splitting that time with the Steelers. Why not just take, because the Peterson Event Center is older is probably due for renovations. Could Pitt just be able to create in the arena and just do it have the arena for football and play and have the turf indoors, and then be able to still convert it and have it ready for basketball season?
You're harnessing your inner Three River Stadium, aren't you?
Well, just thinking, if you have Three Rivers, but then
that would be actually pretty cool. I don't know how many teams actually share a football and or basketball, but I don't know if it's big enough, because I think the basketball ones are usually a tad bit smaller. I don't think they can fit the full field.
But the basketball ones are typically smaller. But where they built the Pete was where old Pitt Stadium was to begin with.
I just didn't know if the infrastructure was long enough, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, I just figured if they used that area as it was a football stadium before it was the Pete, converting it back, I don't think they would have had a lot of additional buildings going up that would have taken away from that spot,
I think that they spent a lot of money, though. I think they'd have to demolish it and redo it. But who knows?
Well, right.
If you had one donor that wanted to throw that money, I mean, if Miami is able to throw a couple donors together that are offering to build a stadium,
the Roonies would probably throw money.
What'd you say?
The Roonies might do it. Just be like, get the hell off our field.
Maybe, but they probably like it. Everyone's in one spot. They probably share trainers and stuff. Think about it. You have Pitt students and stuff that trainers that are going through school. They're working there. The students probably leverage off that, and they probably are able to take advantage and have more training and higher tech medical stuff available to them through Pitt. I mean, Michigan does it. I think we talked about it where they were doing helmet stuff to measure concussions and temperature and stuff through their medical stuff. And I know other schools were doing it too. I just can't remember which ones off the top of my head. Probably Alabama. I mean, I'm sure that they have something cooking where their medical staff's training to try to get their guys better. But who knows? I don't know. The ACC, if Pitt's not going to be able to take it over unless they increase recruiting. They lost their offensive coordinator. He just resigned randomly in the bowl game. And I will say this, or before the bowl game, he's not going to coach. They play Michigan State. That is the best possible matchup for Pitt. Michigan State's defense, or pass defense, is last. Ohio State scored, 40-something in the first half against them? All they did was pass the ball, Matt. Kenny Pickett, invited to the Heisman ceremony, he has a chance to just go ham on them. I was surprised how well they moved the ball against Wake. I know Wake's just been in a lot of shootouts, but who knows? That's going to be something going forward that if you want to build Pitt, you can't just do a one-off. Their name's in the record book, but it can't say Pitt 2021, Pitt 2043,
Well, I know as of right now, Pitt's in the running for Florida State's quarterback, Purdy, entered the transfer portal and could be a landing spot. And depending on who Pitt's deciding to use as the coordinator, I think that would be a win for them to pick him up, because Jordan Travis is going to be QB1 going forward for Florida State. So I just think there's going to be they're looking at a lot of attrition on both sides of the ball.
And you might see a changing of the guard because, like I said, Clemson's losing their athletic director. They're also losing defensive coordinator Venables, which everyone thought was the driving force behind Clemson. He's going back to Oklahoma. I told you I watched his entrance video. I guess not entrance video, but his announcement. He looked so excited that I was shocked because he's been involved in other coaching talks before. And he's always kind of just been yeah, I'm not interested. He must have really just been waiting for Oklahoma. And I didn't realize that he worked with Bob Stoops.
Yeah.
And so, Bob Stoops, which I'm going to randomly bring this up, but did you watch the Big Ten championship game? Or maybe,
yes, I did.
Maybe it was the Ohio State win, but I think it was after the Ohio State win, actually. Bob Stoops, they like asked him about Jim Harbaugh, and Jim Harbaugh came to the set, and he was like, hey, yeah, we should hang out later. He was like, just like off the cuff, like, yeah, I'd really love to just hang out with Jim Harbaugh. And I'm like, Bob Stoops must really miss coaching or something. He's like, to like want to just hang out with the guy and like just talk about like, I really liked all the adjustments he made and blah, 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 bringing in new staff like Bob was talking about it. And I'm like, now I'm seeing him. I saw that passion in his eyes. And then even like one of the other guys made a comment. It was like, yeah, I guess you get two coaches that just love the game and this is what happens. But now I'm like, it makes sense because he's like ready to coach them in the bowl game, isn't he?
Yeah.
Against Oregon. Because then Oregon's old coach, one of their old ones, said that they would be interested in coaching against Bob Stoops because they're friends. As like another thing. And I'm like, is this going to be a thing where you bring out like old coaches? So like when Scott Frost goes 6-6 next year and he gets fired, they bring out like one of their legendary coaches that if they're still alive that are like 100 years old.
Tom Osborne, who was the one that brought him home.
Yeah. He's still around. He'll be coaching against Bob Stoops next year.
Well, I like that they asked Bob Stoops what his first play call was going to be, and he called MASH. Like still staying true to the air raid.
Well, that's what I'm wondering. Like, is he going to help in like an Urban Meyer type situation? Because I talked about it with Ohio State. Like, as soon as Urban Meyer leaves, they look like they've kind of lost something, and he's in the NFL. So it's not like he can be there helping. Bob Stoops has nothing else to do. So, like, he might be able to do a Barry Alvarez, where everyone secretly knows that Alvarez is helping Wisconsin. I don't even know how big of a secret it is, because every coach that comes in just miraculously runs the same offense. It's like, oh, yeah, this is going to be something new. It's like, no, it looks like those 1999 Rose Bowl teams or whatever year they won it. It's like, Alvarez is just doing it. He just doesn't want to coach all the time. And then even, wasn't it... was it Bielema? One of the coaches left and was like, yeah, there's no control. We don't have any control there. You like called him out. So it's like, all right, wonder what he's doing. He's like putting in offensive sets. Like he's like out of practice. I don't know. It's like, I wonder how much, because Venables on the defense, Bob Stoops comes in, focuses on all the offense stuff. I mean, I'm sure just having an analyst like that loves the game clearly. If he's that excited to see a coach win and then wanting to hang out with them. Like, I've never seen that on TV where they're like, yeah, we should hang out after this. You want to get dinner? Baffling. But I don't know. What do you think? Do you think that's going to shift the power in the ACC? Or do you think that was going to be able to reload?
Well, I think people now see Clemson as a threat. And I think if there was ever speculation that there was something shady going on at Clemson, here's a little bit of your proof to it, because you have them go in, and as soon as it's now legal to start paying players, the bottom starts falling out for Clemson. So when everyone was not supposed to be paying players, and now that playing field is somewhat leveled, you're starting to see what happens. Now, to me, what would really prove that staying power of Clemson is, what do you do when your top coaches start getting replaced? Because when you look at what Bowden went through the years, like he had Mark Richt go on, he brought Jimbo Fisher in, they were having different position coaches go on to other places, and being able to fill those with people. That's one of those marks of a better program, that if you have guys that they come up through, and there is that running joke of Alabama where they go to Saban's rehabilitation camp and then they come out as a head coach on the other side. Being able to be at a place where you can craft your skill and then be able to be promoted and move on. That's one of the things you want to see from your assistant coaches, is that they go on and do better things. So when you look at the last couple years at Florida State, towards the tail end there, before Jimbo left for A&M, nobody was looking at the assistants that Florida State had. They were just stale, and they stuck there. And I think you started to see that at Michigan, where Harbaugh wasn't moving guys around until his hand was forced.
Oh, we were still losing guys. I think that's the most frustrating thing is Harbaugh was losing guys that were just getting promotions elsewhere. And it was kind of like, why aren't you guys hiring Ohio State guys? Like Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin took our greatest recruiter, Chris Partridge at the time, and just made him defensive coordinator. Like, I didn't even know if he had ever called defense. I mean, I guess he was a high school coach when Harbaugh brought him in. But, like, I guess Harbaugh promoted him to, like, linebackers. Like, no, gone. And so it's like all these guys are going and they're, like, head coaching. But I think the Saban thing is different because he's hiring head coaches that are getting fired. He's hiring, like, Bill O'Brien, which no one would have touched. He's hiring, like, Rich Rodriguez, which no one would have touched because he was coming off a scandal. And you can go through and just like look at all the coaches he was there, like Sarkisian, drunk, fired. Saban's like, come on down. And then it's like when they leave, I don't even know. Has he had any recent coaches that really left that he redeemed like that took off? I don't think so. I mean, even like the guys that have been successful were like Jimbo Fisher, which he had like a long time ago, didn't he, at LSU? Kirby Smart, which I don't think he was coach anywhere else. I think he just kind of came up there, didn't he? I don't know. The Harbaugh thing, the only one that really stuck is Josh Gaddis, and he was a first-time offensive coordinator. But all his other ones were getting pulled. Like Jed Fish was like the head coach at Arizona, I think. And I think that was the best one. Like I think he fit the most with Harbaugh. It took Gaddis a lot to get into that style of like, hey, because he does the passing coordinator, the running coordinator, which it seemed like it didn't really work after that. First one was gone. He brought in Pep Hamilton. I guess he kind of got fired. The only one that kind of really stuck long was Don Brown. I think he stuck a year or two too long. But he was having so much success that even when he was fired, like you were saying, he shouldn't have been. So who knows? But the younger guys are the ones where it's like, hey, can you leave him alone? Like, what are you taking our guys for? Even now, I think Washington just hired our recruiting coordinator guy. It's like, what the hell? Washington? like well, did you someone from Oregon?
I can't remember if we talked about this last week. Did you see Penn State's defensive coordinators now at Virginia Tech?
Yeah, and I was like, thank God, because they were talking about hiring Josh Gaddis. I think we talked about on the show. And Gaddis won the Broyles Award for top assistant?
Yeah.
This week. So I'm like, oh, finally, he has one good year where he's finally starting to click and getting what works with the run within Harbaugh's offense. Like, you know, because Harbaugh's basically setting stuff up. But now that you're having like him build some of those screens back in, I hadn't seen a screen all year, and then I've seen like so many with the third string Edwards, like I think is probably messing his name up, but he's like the big 5-star recruit or running back. I think they knocked him a star though when he committed to Michigan. Matt, you never know. You can have that 5-star and keep it if you go to Alabama, but once you go to Michigan, they got to take that off you. And seeing him run wild, it's like, guys, where the hell were these screens 2 years ago? Like, what are you doing? So when Virginia Tech, that's where I thought they've been going defense. They're going to go offense. Nope, defense. And I mean, I guess he's been kind of good there. I didn't realize he was at Penn State that long either, because he's been there for Franklin since I think they won the Big Ten together.
Well, and I was surprised because he then hired Coach Marv away from Florida State, who was the linebackers coach this past year, and I started to feel like, okay, well, that's one of those things where you're happy to see position coach move on to a coordinator, but like it's not like he's moving for a lateral job. So, you know, within the conference, I don't know if I like that move, but I'm happy for him, and hopefully that he does good things for most of the games at Virginia Tech.
Hey, we had our defensive lineman coach Greg Madison moved to Ohio State, and everyone was like, "What the hell are you doing?" But it didn't matter because he retired last year, Matt, and then their defense looked like complete shit, and we won the Big Ten championship. So I think Harbaugh should send like Greg Madison a thank you letter, because remember, it was like after the Minnesota game or one of the first games, Ryan Day like called him up and was like, "Hey, can you come look at our defense and see what's wrong?" And I don't know if he ever consulted, but if he did, and he set up a Michigan win, like maybe we could forgive you for leaving like that. But that's another one where they also, Ohio State hired our linebackers coach, just to land one of their defensive linemen in that recruiting class. I think it was Harrison, maybe. It's like all of a sudden he was like Michigan, Michigan, Michigan. Last day, he signs with Ohio State, and everyone's kind of like, what the hell? That kind of came out of left field. And then the coaches are like, oh, yeah, by the way, we're going to Ohio State too. They hired both of them at the same time when Ryan Day came in. And I was like, oh, that's why you flipped. You turncoats. So you're talking about Michigan guys not get poached. Like, that's the worst. Like, that would be like if Florida State's best guys are just going to Ohio State, or not Ohio State, but Clemson to help recruit. It's like, what are you doing? Play you guys every year. And so now to see them almost get fired because basically their defense is they're bringing in the defensive coordinator from Oklahoma State, which is funny because like Ohio State's been making fun of Big 12 defenses for like the last 5 years. Like, oh, yeah, if we played in the Big 12, we'd have 100 points every week. And now they're bringing in a coordinator from there, Matt. So what do you think of that move?
Well, I think it makes sense because when you look at if you can defend the wide open offenses of the Big 12, then when you get into 3 tight end I formation offenses, that's a walk in the park. It's I think it's a lot tougher.
I don't know. I don't know how many guys have come in with the spread and had like immediate success. Maybe Urban Meyer, that's been it. But he's hired Larry Johnson away from Penn State. Like he's made moves that were like, hey, that's not going to fly here.
But I think when you look defensively, I think it's tough. I think it's tougher to go from an offense that is more pro style to spread than to have a defense that's used that you're coordinating more of a spread type look, and now you're trying to go up against these heavier personnel groups.
I think it's just going to be. I know from a scheme thing, but I'm talking more about like personnel and changes. Because even whenever McDonald came to Michigan from the Ravens last year, like everyone keeps saying, and you heard it if you watch the Big Ten Championship, they brought up like 3 times, like, oh, Michigan really struggles with the up-tempo offenses. I'm like, nah, they haven't done that since like about week 6 because they weren't struggling with the offenses. He was trying to sub like he was an NFL defensive coordinator. And in the college, you can't really do that because he was all constantly getting caught with like linemen. As soon as the ref takes his hand off the ball, he doesn't wait for them to get set. Like they do the subs and that's it. So Michigan's defense was a mess. As soon as he stopped doing that, guess what? No more issues with up tempo. It's like, bro, just stop subbing. What are you doing? Like it's like they're getting 20 yards a pop, and our guys are gassed out there. And so I think that's going to be one of the things where even the Ohio State write up on it, because I read it, they were saying like, oh, he doesn't really utilize the big defensive linemen that we've been recruiting. And to me, that's the first red flag. Like, okay, you just signed up for 6 years of Wisconsin football, right? So you're going to go for, and you just watch Michigan run all over you. So you hire a guy that goes with smaller defensive linemen and not so much edge pressure. I'm like, it might work out. You never know. But if you're coming from constantly having linemen that are more mobile to kind of stop those zone reads, when Michigan zone reads are basically fake zone reads, the quarterback's not going to run. He might pass off of it, but you don't need to have linemen that can run on that. And Wisconsin's going to pound you in the mouth. Same with Penn State. So we'll see. I think that would be the complete turn where Ohio State builds himself into a Big 12 school. But if they're the only one kind of doing that, going spread, high tempo offense, and then you get a team that just grinds it out on the ground and you can't stop it, is it going to work? Because, I mean, like, TCU's had success when the Big 12 first transitioned to that and they didn't change, if you remember. Like from 2011 to 2015 or so, 16, they were all transitioning to that type of offense. TCU didn't. They were like, yeah, we're just going to keep pounding you in the mouth. And they had success. I think, weren't they in a Rose Bowl with Wisconsin and stuff? I don't know if they won it. I can't remember. But who knows? It's Ohio State, though. They get better recruits, which is, I think, even driving them more mad that their defense looks so bad this year. But who knows?
Definitely makes sense.
Anything else you have on the ACC? I know I changed the toggle on the video already.
I think those were pretty much the big ones.
Basically, not much more for the Big Ten. The Big Ten kind of had a similar streak where Ohio State had won the Big Ten. Michigan finally got it done. I don't know if I don't think we even did predictions because we were going long last week. I thought Michigan would win, and if they lost, it was going to be like how they lost to Iowa a few years ago, where it was like a field goal away. I did see some of the analysts talk about Michigan during like the college football playoff show pregame. Michigan was so close. If they would have beat Ohio State or Iowa in 2016, they're in the playoffs. Like, it didn't matter if they would have lost to Ohio State if they didn't lose that Iowa game. And I think Wilton Speight just got hurt. I think this is the first time you're looking at Michigan where they have the depth, where like a third-string running back throws a touchdown pass that's pretty much a bomb, and the backup quarterback's out there making plays too. A few years ago, the quarterback gets hurt, and it's like complete disaster. So maybe it just took time to build that depth. I think taking the transfer as a quarterback really hurt Harbaugh, where he was relying on them too much. And this year he took a transfer quarterback that's a legit bench guy. Like, no offense to him. He came from Texas Tech where he played and had some good stats there, but it's more of like a John O'Korn, like, all right, that's our backup guy. If he comes in, he might be able to get the job done. But it's not like so scary where Harbaugh's not afraid to run the backup, J.J. McCarthy. Like, he's in there throwing the ball and doing whatever. So I think it's just a depth thing. In 2018, they were close. The one thing that I did see is the Big Ten now, the Big Ten East, is the only conference to have 3 different playoff teams from the same division. And I think most people would be shocked to know that Penn State's not one of them. Michigan State, Michigan, and Ohio State. Penn State should have been in, which is even more absurd. Can you imagine? One division has 4 different playoff teams or teams that could make the playoffs. And that's why I know they lost to Pitt that year. Pitt, ACC champion Pitt, kept Penn State from being the 4th Big Ten team in from that same division the year they picked Ohio State ahead of them. And we all saw that worked out. Wasn't that the 31-0 year where Ohio State looked like shit? And so in terms of this and the Big Ten, I think it's big. Like, it's big that Michigan's back. It doesn't look like Nebraska. I think a lot of people were expecting like someone on the West to kind of step up. Iowa, they might have stepped up. Don't lose another game. Like, why are you losing 2 games? If you're going to be the West champ, there's no back door. Like, there was no back door for the Big Ten to get in if Michigan lost. I think I told you, the ESPN were saying right at the beginning of the day after Oklahoma State choked, they said Big Ten, Michigan and Michigan and Georgia are in no matter what. And I honestly think it would have happened. I don't think they would have put Notre Dame in, even if Michigan would have had 2 losses at that point. I think the Big Ten was too strong, and you're down between Ohio State and Michigan just beat them, so they were going to put Michigan in no matter what. It didn't really come down to that as they pasted Iowa, which Harbaugh said after the game, and I thought it was kind of weird, where he said that he had already ordered Big Ten championship banners and hung them up. And I'm like, kind of bold. So then I did read that they clarified it, where he did. He ordered championship banners throughout the week, and he had one of them hung up so whenever they got selected for the playoffs. Like, that's how confident he was going in, where he's like, hey, they're being hung up right now, so that when we fly back, they're going to be there. But it's like, what if you'd have lost? What are you going to do with those banners? Do you return them? Custom made, right? But he looked like he was having fun. And like I said, a lot of staff turnover over the past couple of years. Finally, I'm wondering if this staff's going to stick together for a few years. Because I think if you had, the continuity's not there, the depth wasn't there. Now you have both. And can it turn into a longer run? Because I think the Big Ten's stronger when it has top teams. It was Penn State. They had a chance. They couldn't sustain it. They couldn't take that next step. Now, like you said, they're going through the cycles where they're losing their coaches, and they weren't even competing this year, really. Losing to Iowa early. I know they played Michigan close at home, but like they had already lost to Ohio State, so they were pretty much done. And then the inexplicable one, I didn't think they would lose to Michigan State. I didn't think Michigan State had the depth, but now you have them playing Pitt. It's like, what if the Big Ten wins all those games in the bowl game, they're going to look great. I think they have a lot of favorable matchups. In terms of college football, Michigan, a lot of people complained about their draw. I think it's win-win. You're in the playoffs for the first time. You have a young team. You're playing Georgia. Georgia hasn't had success. Everyone says Georgia was the clear number one team. So if you lose, it doesn't hurt recruiting really, because you're supposed to lose. I think they're a touchdown underdog right now. Michigan is. So I think the worst case scenario would have been them drawing Cincinnati. Because if you lose that game, then you lost to Cincinnati in the playoffs. Like, how embarrassing. And that hurts recruiting. If you beat Cincinnati, you're still going to get negatively recruited against, because they're going to say, yeah, you won a playoff game that wasn't really a playoff game. You played Cincinnati. And then if you lose to Alabama in the championship game, then the people are just like, yeah, see, you were a joke.
Well, you can spin that any way, depending on how you want it to be.
Well, now you're going to see it.
There's always going to be people that are using that recruiting against you.
Well, now you're going to see it, because they're going to be playing Georgia, and if they play them close, then I think you can really build that up. And if they win, holy hell, like, look out, because then you just beat Georgia, and Georgia on paper is the most talented team this year. Did they look like they're the most well-coached? I don't know. I think if you're a Georgia fan, you're nervous. I think if you're a Michigan fan, you're nervous. Because you don't know. It could be a blowout either way. Could be a hell of a game back and forth where one team pulls it out. I don't think it's going to be a blowout. I'm surprised the line's that big. But who knows? I think Harbaugh, when he's had a team like this and he's had time to prepare, they're always really, really prepared. At the beginning of the year, when he plays like Florida and those teams where it's supposed to be a close game, like, they've usually put it on him. It's only late in the year where you have like the injuries and they come out flat, and like people not playing in the bowl game or coaches leaving. I think that's what really hurt Michigan in the past. Now let's see what he can put together in the playoffs. Is the talent going to be enough? I mean, people were projecting Ohio State to play Georgia for the national championship. They handled Ohio State, so we'll see what happens. I think the big thing is Georgia's offense isn't that good. Michigan's offense, people say, isn't that good, so you're going to have strength on strength in this game. It could be like 7-10. There's I think it's kind of, Michigan's built like Clemson. Strong defensive ends, like that's your best guy. Hutchinson should win the Heisman. If he doesn't, they should just get rid of the Heisman. Because at this point, in the past like 10 years, and I've said it on the show, the Heisman's so boring, they're just giving it to the best quarterback on a playoff team, right? Maybe Lamar Jackson, he wasn't in the playoffs, right? But I think the rest of them, they were. Unless I'm forgetting someone. It's kind of just like, oh yeah, and then last year they gave it to a wide receiver because they didn't think Mac Jones was good enough, even though he's like the best rookie in the NFL right now. So it's like, oh. So like if you're talking about a team, Michigan had a 2% chance to win the Big Ten. The only player that made it happen is Hutchinson. So much that, did you see that block against Iowa where he almost sacked the quarterback with the tackle? He like threw him into the quarterback like a 300-pound lineman. Absurd. He had more sacks against Ohio State than they let up all year. I think they gave up, or I guess the same. I think they gave up 3 sacks going into that Michigan game. Hutchinson had 3 sacks. They had like 12 pressures or something like that. He had 12 pressures. Like, he gave Stroud as much trouble as all the other teams combined. You like, if you're looking at it from a stats point, I know defensive guys don't have the stats. Him getting the invite is good, but like at that point, it's kind of just like a false thanks. If everyone puts the quarterback first and him second, like, oh great, good, congratulations, but it's still a quarterback award. So that's the one thing where it's kind of like annoying. There's not like any suspense anymore. There's no reason to watch it. Everyone's already saying that Young won it, didn't he? Because he scored on Georgia's defense. They don't talk about how he took 6-win Auburn to overtime, and it took him 4 overtimes to even get a 2-point conversion, man, or whatever, to win that game. So,
well, I also look at. I think Hutchinson is deserving to have his spot there, But I think if he were to have missed, I think that the rest of the pieces around.
Yeah, but you can't say that with Alabama, though. Because it's the same thing I brought up against Stroud. It doesn't matter who Ohio State plugs in at quarterback. They have 3 first-round NFL wide receivers. You've seen it for the past 10 years. He's a system QB. All Ohio State quarterbacks are system QBs. If you draft one in the first round, you know what you're getting. You're getting a system QB. Alabama has talent that's above everyone else in the SEC. So, yeah, he's putting up big numbers. Some of the times against Georgia, he was just throwing up bombs, like in one-on-one coverage. Were they accurate? Yeah, but could that have easily been knocked away? Yeah, but the receivers are so good, they're getting the ball. So, if you're seeing the same quarterback on the same team that's number one, like Alabama has the number one recruiting class for 10 years, and you're looking at the Heisman, and it says the best player in college football. I look at it from who makes your team better. I was surprised that Michigan State's running back Walker didn't get an invite. And maybe because all the newspaper guys decided to vote for Hutchinson instead. But Michigan State was complete dog shit last year. Michigan was complete dog shit last year. You saw when Hutchinson got hurt, Michigan's defense looked totally different. They looked like garbage last year. I know they changed coordinators, but Hutchinson creating 15 pressures a game or 7 pressures, whatever it is, a game, that's a lot. And then because he's there, you're doubling him. You can't double the rest of the line. He opens everything up. So if you're saying the best football player, great, awesome. But don't say we're just giving it to the guy with the best stats on the number one team right now. And I almost wonder if they put Alabama number one just for that reason. Because they very easily could have put Michigan number one and Georgia at 4, and everyone would have been the same. Because we can talk about the playoffs. I think it worked out for Michigan. I think they're going to get Georgia either way. And like I said, from an optics point, it's win-win. You're not going to lose to Cincinnati. If Cincinnati upsets someone, it's going to be Bama, which would be even funnier. Because Nick Saban losing to Cincinnati, how funny would that be? And then all the schools that called Fickle, and he's you got to wait till my team gets eliminated, and they're we can't wait for you. And then he wins the national championship, going through Alabama and then Georgia. That would be hilarious. If Michigan loses to Georgia, that's what I want to happen. Although we'll know first because they play earlier. But everyone's talking about Cincinnati's in. That proves that the system's not rigged. No, it's rigged. Georgia has no top wins. Why are they in? And I'm not saying they're only in on talent and the eye test. They had a chance to win against a top team. Got smoked. What'd they lose by 17 to Bama? And I'm saying this because it makes no factor. They could crush Michigan, and I would still feel the same way. I don't think Notre Dame should be in because, it's not really Notre Dame's fault, but it kind of is. Because as soon as they sign the deal with the ACC, where they're going to play a certain amount of teams, but it's an asterisk where they're we're playing ACC teams, but they're kind of our old Big East buddies, but not really. They're only playing, I think, one of Clemson or Florida State or Miami a year, but they really got to get those games in against Boston College and whoever else they're playing that are complete garbage teams. So then they're hey, what do you mean we dropped our Big Ten crossovers and we're really limiting who we play in the ACC in our schedules week? What? They did it on purpose. And so that's why it's they're USC's down. And we couldn't schedule in case they were good again. It's all right, well, now you just screwed yourself out of a playoff game. Why schedule Cincinnati then? They obviously scheduled Cincinnati a few years ago when they didn't think they would be good. And if Cincinnati wasn't good, they'd be undefeated. I know they scheduled Wisconsin this year because they're kind of picking and choosing teams that they don't think are going to be that good. Because, look at their schedule. They're scheduling a bunch of has-beens. Plus the ACC limitations where they're not scheduling Clemson. They're not. How many times have they played them in the regular season? How many times have they played Florida State in the regular season with this ACC crossover? Not that many. One time maybe?
Yeah.
So, reap what you sow. If they would have been in the ACC and played Pitt, who knows? Maybe they're the champs and they're in the playoffs. I think Oklahoma State really screwed everyone with their 4 interceptions, because I think if Oklahoma State won, whichever SEC team lost, they were out. I don't think there's any way they would have let Cincinnati out this year, because I think they were already setting this narrative up like, look, don't expand the playoffs. It's fair. Cincinnati got in, but this is one of those rare years where all of the top Power 5 conferences that they call them, they all have multiple losses. That's like never happened. There's only 3 teams that don't, right? The 3 teams that are in: Bama, Michigan, and Georgia.
Yeah.
And Georgia's not even a conference champ. So all you needed was one more team where they would either have to throw Georgia in for no reason, and then at that point, I think they would have had to make Georgia play Alabama. Because if they put them in over Cincinnati, they weren't going to keep Georgia at 3. They just lost by 17 points. Oklahoma State, I typed this out to you guys because Oklahoma State would have had a top 10 win with that Baylor win, or at least semi-close. And then they would have had also Oklahoma that's floating around the top 10. Georgia's best win is 9-3 Clemson. That's why, and they barely beat them at the beginning of the year, if you remember, because their offense isn't that good. That's why the one thing that really stood out to me is Michigan's kind of built similar to Clemson. They don't have the stud quarterback on offense, though, but on defense, they're very similar. Georgia couldn't move the ball on them. Georgia had trouble moving the ball on Bama. If Bama wasn't scoring so much, I don't even know if Georgia would have scored that much. It kind of turned into a little bit of a shootout, but not really. That game was over. And I texted you before the game on Friday. I said Alabama's going to win. And they're going to probably win big. Because I knew. If you look at the stats, Georgia didn't belong. They just got really lucky this year. And Cincinnati got really lucky that they played Notre Dame, and Notre Dame was the team behind them. Because if those 2 teams didn't play, I guarantee you Notre Dame would be in the playoffs. It would have been between Cincinnati and Georgia, and who knows what they would have done. Would they have shoved Georgia in and then been like, oh, sorry, Cincinnati, you don't have as good a talent, or whatever other thing they make up. But the playoff committee, still garbage. Just expand it. I know Michigan's in this year, and hopefully it bumps recruiting up, especially if they can do it 2 years in a row, or maybe 3 if we're getting lucky. Win a couple Big Ten championships in a row, make the playoffs, and then you get that recruiting bump I told you about. If you're in the playoffs for multiple years, Clemson's finally seeing it. They had 2 top 5 classes for the first time ever, going back through the history that I found. The past 2 years. It took them, 3 national championship appearances to get that?
But I think that stat only is applicable if you do something when you're there, because Michigan State was a playoff
but only
team.
one time. And they had a recruiting bump for 1 year. Penn State won the Big Ten. They had a recruiting bump for 1 year. I think this was the year. Or no, it would have been last year. But they didn't capitalize on it. That's why I said if you can string a couple together in a row, you can have one really good class. Michigan had a top 5 class with Harbaugh. And then the class this year that's seniors, it was more of a drop-off, and everyone said, oh, this is a disappointing class. I think they even brought it up. The players were saying, everyone said it was a disappointing class. But I also wonder how much of that is that good class. A lot of those guys went pro. Some of them are 6-year seniors now because of the COVID rules, which also kind of helped Michigan out with that depth that they didn't have. Because if you're losing guys every year to the draft early, every year, and it's kind of well, are you going to knock Harbaugh for getting 11 guys drafted? But he can't do that every year if you're not, winning and backfilling that class with other guys. Because it's kind of like a win. You have to it takes a while to build that up. Clemson, they didn't come, they're not an Alabama or Ohio State recruiting. It's going to take a while for them to build it up. If Dabo starts losing and Pitt goes on a run, or Virginia Tech or Florida State or Miami or someone starts winning a couple, I don't know if they're going to sustain it. You got to have continued success, especially if his assistants are all gone. I don't know. Pitt, 1 year, winning the ACC, I know they weren't in the playoffs. I don't know how big of a bump that gets them. I think you'll see something similar to Penn State where they're up. They have one high class from it. And then if they don't win it again, it'll just gradually start to drop back down. That's what happened with Michigan State.
Well, I think
now they're living in the portal, though. The transfer portal is another equalizer.
I think a big thing with Pitt, though, is that you have to look at who are they going to replace their offensive coordinator with. I think if they have Brendan Marion, who's their wide receivers coach right now, if they promote from within and bump him up, I think he has a lot of Pitt connections that I think he could help bridge that gap with Pitt.
They bring in Joe Brady. He doesn't like recruiting. Pitt doesn't like recruiting either.
A match made in heaven.
I know. Oh man, I'll be getting killed. They were like, "You're so positive to Pitt this show," and then why would you make a comment like that? I mean, if I'm looking at it, if you expand the playoffs, I think you're going to see more of a traditional 1990s, 1980s college football where there are a couple top teams, but it's so mixed up that like upsets. Like you remember Ohio State were always like right there, and Michigan was constantly upsetting them. It's like, and then finally Michigan broke through and won a national championship in '97, and everyone was like that had to annoy Ohio State so bad. Where now it's like you don't have that because no one else from the ACC is making a big playoff game to really push Clemson. And to make it even worse, the team that is Notre Dame. They're stealing the bid that should go to like a Pitt normally. And it's like Clemson's like kind of just living in that, and they're loving it. You need to have a team that can kind of push it and say like, yo, we're going to be in the Sugar Bowl or whatever it is. Because I think Michigan's in the Orange Bowl this year. So whatever one Pitt's in. Is it the Sugar? Is it the Peach? It's one of those where it's like, hey, now they can sell that to recruits. The past couple of years, Notre Dame's been taking it if they're not in the playoffs. It's like, and Notre Dame's been losing it. Notre Dame hasn't won a big bowl game since the 90s still, I think. So like it would be hilarious if Freeman comes in, and who is Notre Dame playing? Is it Oklahoma? No, is Oklahoma playing Oregon? I don't remember. But I know Ohio State's playing Utah. Pitt's playing Michigan State. I only know the Big Ten ones. So if Notre Dame wins that'd be funny for like the first game for their new coach is a like basically a BCS or New Year's Six game, whatever they're calling them, and he wins the first one in like 2 or 3 decades, whatever it is. I don't remember what year it is. But got to get it done. That's what I wonder. If the playoff expands, I think you see a bigger jump. The other thing that I was going to bring in is right now, Michigan distanced himself a little bit more from Ohio State. They're 4 conference championships ahead. The only 2 teams that have more, Oklahoma, who's going to join the SEC, so you know they won't be seeing anymore, and Nebraska, who's in the Big Ten, and they're also not going to see anymore. So in 20 years, and maybe even shorter than that. I don't know how many Ohio State's behind. But I think you either see Ohio State or Michigan become the conference leader because Oklahoma's not going to be in the Big 12 lapping them up anymore. That's my last college football stat for you. You got anything else, Matt?
The only other thing I was going to say was I thought Hutchinson, it was good for him to be sent for the Heisman. But I think when you look at what Kenny Pickett was able to do for Pitt this year in particular,
that's why I wouldn't mind if Pickett won. I would say that which 3 guys, if I'm thinking off the top of my head, made their teams completely better that no one expected. Hutchinson at Michigan, they were picked to finish 4th in the Big Ten East. I think just in the division. Walker at Michigan State, without him, their team doesn't win double digits. They might only win 3 games. He single-handedly won the Michigan game. If he's not on the team, Michigan wins by double digits. And I know they had the touchdown taken away, which kind of helped. Michigan State come back, but Walker still had like 5 touchdowns. And then Pickett would be the other one, where Pitt, who picked Pitt to win? Basically no one. Even when they were in the game, everyone was saying Wake Forest is going to win it. Pitt finally wins it. Pickett's going over. Those would be the 3 guys I would have on my ballot. Stroud and Young, no. What did you do with your team that was so outstanding? Alabama, did you go undefeated? No. Ohio State, did you go undefeated? Oh, definitely no. Okay, then you guys aren't in there. You guys had a loaded team with loaded schedules, or easy schedules, and you didn't get it done. That's not Heisman to me. Like, what was his Heisman moment? Beating Georgia? Like, that's it. Stroud had none. I don't even know why he's on there. Was it lighting up Michigan State, maybe? because he didn't do anything against Michigan besides dink and dunk. People were like surprised he had so many yards. I'm like, yeah, he was throwing 5-yard crossing patterns the entire time and then punting. Or even on the touchdown drives, it took him 12 minutes that one. 7 to 12 minutes, I think, to score their one touchdown because he was dinking and dunking the whole time. So, I mean, you got to have a Heisman moment. Like the Hutchinson sacks against Ohio State, that's a Heisman moment. Even like the Iowa ones where he's like getting in there, he had a big sack early in the game. But I mean, that was a blowout. But like, you still got to have a Heisman moment. I think the Ohio State one was big enough for him and enough to win it. Pickett had his fake slide. What do you think of that? I saw it live because I have the two TV setups. I had it on mute. I thought they blew the whistle.
He got away with it.
I thought they blew the whistle because watching it without sound, the defense stops, and I'm like, "What did they let him run in the end zone for? Like, this is kind of dumb." And then everyone's like, "Touchdown!" I'm like, "Oh my god!" So I popped the sound up, and they're like, "Yeah," and they didn't really say that it was a fake slide, but I'm like, watching that without sound, that was 100% a fake slide. And then he admitted that it was on purpose. And I'm like, if I was the ref, next time you did that, I wouldn't be able to blow my whistle and you're going to get murdered. Like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever seen. I know it worked for him. But, like, if I'm an NFL GM, the first thing I say on my interview with him is, bro, you're never doing a fake slide. Ever. If I see it, we will cut you. And I don't mean from the roster. I mean with a knife. And then guess what, Matt? No more sliding. No more sliding. Because that was idiotic. After they had because it wasn't the Michigan Iowa game. Maybe it was one of the other Oklahoma State Baylor ones. But there was another play then that they reviewed to see if it was targeting. I think it was the Michigan one. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, you're having this slow-mo look at that. Meanwhile, on the other screen, the guy's fake sliding and scoring touchdowns. Unbelievable. Big Ten refs blowing it up, although they didn't eject our guy. I'm like, this would be the most Big Ten thing, to eject a guy right before they play in the playoffs. Like, for no reason. In your own conference championship game during a blowout. But they didn't. They pulled it back. So I was like, oh, thank God. Could you imagine? Going into the NFL now. Steelers. I really didn't have much for the NFL. Injuries have really been killing my fantasy team. Matt had a chance to help me win the division. He blew it. So I want to thank you. How could your team barely score any points, Matt?
That was the biggest kick in the nuts.
All you had to do was score 3 more points. 3 more? Well, what are you doing?
Once again, there was a player sitting on my bench that had the points that I needed. And just poor roster moves. At one point, it was like every time I was looking at an update, it was like, oh, this guy scored, this guy scored. I wasn't even looking at how many points my opponent had. I was like, oh, I'm going to cruise in this one. There's no way he's scoring that many. And then he had Johnson and Freiermuth. I was like, oh, I'm in trouble right now. I watched mine. I sent it to you as soon as I could start getting alerts. I'm like already running on fumes. Because Derrick Henry and McCaffrey. Which McCaffrey? Are you serious? You're going to shut it down again, which I'm not going to go into that again. But it's like, get real. And then I get the alert. Tyrod Taylor, my backup quarterback, because Baker Mayfield's been playing hurt, so he's been garbage. So I'm like, oh, Taylor's going to carry me to a few wins, which he did. Hurt his wrist. I'm like, oh, God. Oh, God. He had 20 yards in the air. So gets me, I think, he don't even know if he got me a point, Matt. They took him out. And then, because I think whatever he had through the air, he threw an interception maybe when he got hurt. I'm like, typical. Then Thielen catches one screen for 1 point, and then he's injured. I'm like, I'm dead. I am dead. If there's any chance, I need Matt to win. I need Matt to win and just get me the division title. That's all I want out of this year. And I look at your score, and I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. 160 points? And you only lost by 3? I'm like, if I got to tip the cap to you, at least you tried. I know I've been so disappointed because you're on the outs on the playoffs. I think right now. I didn't look at the updated. Yeah, I'm definitely out. And
I think you're still alive. I don't think there's really any teams that are out besides like maybe 3. But right now, like that really, really crushes you. Like I have enough wins right now to kind of coast me into the playoffs and be. I mean, I guess coast me into the playoffs. I haven't looked at the updated. I'm going to bring them up right now. as we talk, because we're late in the show. If you're listening to our fantasy football talk, I know it's a big hit, though. People have been worried about my team, and rightfully so. I've been really, really down because it was such a good year. And then McCaffrey really just stuck me because now I don't have any stars. I'm playing a bunch of whatevers. So I have an 83% chance. Your percent went down to 1% because you have to win and hope the other guys lose in front of you. You're like, what? You're 11th now we're in 14-team league, so you're 3 spots behind. But that win really would have put you right there.
Well, and the funny thing is, you look at the last 4 weeks, and the last 4 or 5 weeks should all be wins. One player flip flops and that's sitting on the bench for the wrong quarterback.
The NFL really screwed me because they added that extra week, and so when I extended our schedule, I'm matched up against the best team in our league, the back-to-back last 2 weeks of the season. So I have no chance of even winning. Going into the playoffs, and I guarantee even if my team squeaks into the playoffs, because I'm right there, I basically just need, 2 teams to lose next week, which they might be playing each other, so it might be a lock at this point. ESPN says 83% chance, so maybe not. All I have to do is just luckily get in, but I'm really sad that my injuries cost me the division championship.
Well, I was laughing because I needed a quarterback, and surprised in our free agency pool was to see Taysom Hill was available. I was like, I'll sign him. I've been riding the streak of New Orleans quarterbacks. We'll just keep it consistent. Well, that top guy picked him up and then left him on the bench, and he scored 20 points. I was like, what kind of asshole signs someone and then doesn't even put him in the lineup?
I saw that same thing because I was playing him. I think it wasn't that this week, and I thought, oh my gosh, he has 4 interceptions or something. He had something crazy interceptions, but he had so many rushing yards that he still scored 20 points. I'm like, oh damn, just my luck. So I look at it and I'm like, he didn't even play him. He didn't even play him. Oh my gosh, you got to be kidding me. That was my thought. And then there's my man Baker Mayfield still on the bench, rocking in 10 points. 11 points. I'm like, I guess I have to go back to my man, Matt Ryan. Unless I play Cam Newton. At this point, it's what Joker do you play? And my running backs are kind of just dead. And if Thielen's out, yikes. I need another guy to kind of just get hurt. And like I said, I'm playing the top guy again. So I'm basically gifting him the division. Just to show you how hurt my team is, my projected total is 49 points. Last week, I think it was 60-something, and I'm like, and all year, I've averaged 120. So, just to see such a steep drop-off, it's kind of what am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to do? I can't do anything other than going to the playoffs, and maybe if I have one upset in the playoffs, which it would be hilarious if I lost weeks 13 and 14 against the top team, and then by some miracle I upset him in the first round of the playoffs. That's what I want to happen. That's what I want. I want to be the Cincinnati of our league. But, I mean, the other thing, Steelers, that 2-point conversion against the Ravens, where the Ravens went for it, they said they had injuries at cornerback, which I think the one guy, isn't he out for the rest of the year now?
Yeah.
I think so.
Torn pack.
So, I think that was they had it. Lamar Jackson rushed 2 passes on that last drive. They had a wide open touchdown on that blitz, which he read it, and then he led him too much to the middle of the field and overthrew him. Where I think Andrews tried to settle down. If he would have just hit him when he settled down, they would have had the touchdown earlier. And same for that. It's he's still a little too jittery for me. And at this point in his career, why? Maybe are you afraid to get hit? I don't know what else it could be. I know he had TJ Watt in his face, but if I'm a Ravens fan, definitely doesn't give me confidence in him to make that jump to Super Bowl champion. I'm sorry. Maybe I'm wrong on Lamar. I know that they're kind of regular season heroes. The other game, Patriots passed 3 times, Matt. How do you not just load the box? What the hell are you doing, Bills?
I like that Belichick came out with his Navy mask on and then proceeds to just run the ball right down Buffalo's throat. Just like he was a service academy.
It was almost like it was fast. Like the game was like done. I don't know how long it was, but it was way earlier than I thought it was going to be. And almost like, this is absurd that they said 3 passes. And I'm like, I guess they didn't throw the ball. And I was trying to like think, I'm like, maybe I know all 3 passes that they threw. But the funny thing is, Houston Texans are the first team eliminated. Guess who's still alive? Urban Meyer. They have to win out and have some help. But speaking of Urban Meyer, Jim Harbaugh is the only coach to make the college football playoff and the NFL playoff currently, Matt.
There you go.
Because the playoffs have only been around for like 10 years, and I think the only coaches that have coached in both is Urban, not making it, and Saban. He didn't make the playoffs. So someone else, there were a couple other ones that were like assistants or whatever that were close. But those were the big ones that stood out. Couldn't get it done. Maybe if Harbaugh wins the championship, then I'll really be celebrating. I'll get you a shirt. I'll just give everyone championship shirts. I'm like, hey, you want this Michigan National Championship shirt? People will be like, are you kidding me? I'm like, your kids want those? I'll get them. I'll get them for you. The one thing I did have up here, which I forgot to mention. So Michigan and Pitt had a common opponent, that Western Michigan team. Michigan beat them 47-14. Pitt lost 44-41. Like, how are you giving up 41 points to Western Michigan? And so I looked through their schedule. 28, 23, 24, 20, 15, 30. Those are their typical scores. They did score 64 once against Kent State, which wasn't Kent State in the championship, which is kind of weird. But come on, Pitt. If a team is averaging 20 points and you give up 44 in a win or in a loss, you don't deserve the playoffs. Like, get out of here. Get out of here. What are you doing? And I remember watching that because I remember like, well, Michigan killed this team. Why is Pitt struggling? Why are they letting that guy run down the field?
Well, and that's the kind of moves that just make you shake your head. It's like, how do you do that to them and then play everybody else really tough?
Well, the real kicker would have been if they had beat Miami. I wanted to hear that argument in the playoffs where them versus Georgia, whereas a conference champ that also beat Tennessee, where they're like, well, Pitt didn't play anyone in the non-conference. Oh, wait, they did play. They played Tennessee, and it's like, oh, my gosh, that's a common opponent. I know Georgia beat them worse, but it's not like Pitt didn't play them. And they beat Clemson, which is also a common opponent, and they beat Clemson by more than what Georgia did. So that would have been a funny argument where you have an ACC champ versus Georgia, and that's why I said a couple weeks ago, you're looking at it where right now you could have my last thought on the show, because I know we're long, thank God Oregon beat Ohio State. Because I think otherwise you would have had a Michigan-Ohio State rematch and a Georgia and Alabama rematch. There's no way they would have put Cincinnati in over Ohio State that only lost to Michigan. Zero chance. That's how close we were. Very dangerous to that happening, which would have been awful for me.
And then Ryan Day would have scored 100.
He's still trying to count those points, Matt. He thinks he might have scored 100 points on Michigan. He's just trying to figure out how to add those up.
NCAA 14.
He did say that his team's sick. He's like, well, our team was sick that week. I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? Your team was sick now? I thought Stroud was the only one that was sick because he cleared that up in his pregame conference. That Stroud, he's healed. He's not sick anymore. He's ready to play. But now he was, Matt. They're like, well, we were sick. And our other coaches are bad, so we're going to make some moves. And Utah is a pretty bad matchup for them, too. Because they started to shift their defense, like I said, away from the run defense. And in the Big Ten, that doesn't really work. And Utah's been running that same style. So if they'd run all over them like Oregon did, and then they're like, you know what, we're doubling down. We're going to bring in a Big 12 defensive coordinator. Because we like this. We like those shootouts. But you can't dink and dunk in the shootout. That's my final thought. Ben, did we talk about Ben? He's about to retire. I think we mentioned that earlier.
We've been saying, we didn't bring it up tonight, but yeah, Ben's on his way out.
Yeah, he said that would be my final bell. Ben's on his way out. They asked him about it, and he like kind of beat around the bush. But he's been telling people that this is his last year. So I don't know how to feel about that because as a future Green Bay Packers owner, Matt, I think I'd like Aaron Rodgers to stay with my team. I don't know if that's tampering if I bring that up. But no, some people had asked. I'm not a Packers owner yet. Still wait on that one. I don't know if I want to make the move. We'll see what happens because it would be cool if the show owned him. But that's my final bell. Ben's going to retire. Let's see what happens. Aaron Rodgers still could be the guy in Pittsburgh, which would be hilarious because so many people hate him for his vax stance, and he'd fit right in Pittsburgh. Anything you got for the final bell?
Yes, I do. Want to give congratulations to the Lady Knowles soccer champs.
I was wondering if you're going to bring that up because if not, I was going to mention it. I was waiting for you to forget, and I'll say, "Wow, really surprised that you didn't bring it up." But
no, when you win champion, raise a banner. More banners being raised.
Wasn't it a penalty kick too?
Shootout. Win.
Shootout, yeah. I knew it was something like that. I can't remember what they called him. Did you watch it?
No, I knew it was on.
What the hell are you paying for ESPN Plus for then?
It's dissertation season.
I didn't watch it either. I honestly forgot that it was on because normally I
knew it was on, and
I keep an eye on some of that stuff. But yeah, we'll see. It's a good thing they're bringing in a new AD, Matt, to focus on those other sports.
Hey, we got softball national champs. Got soccer national champs.
It's better to come in second.
We're going to have football coming back.
Michigan's right back in number 2. All those sports that they went number 2 in, Matt.
We had that basketball championship.
Basketball. What, women's? Or are you talking about
men's.
ACC?
No, talking men's.
ACC championship? Or are you talking about the one where you claim?
The national championship from 2 years ago. They're the ACC champs. And then it can't help it that there's a pandemic. We would have won it that year. I'm raising it.
I think Michigan can claim that too.
They can.
I don't know if it's basketball, but they really got screwed in baseball that year. That's for sure. But Braves won, so I'll take that one. Although now did you see all those scouts were like, and Scott Boras were coming out of Atlanta saying that it's ruining the sport? The way they tanked, and now they're ruining the sport. I'm like, teams have been tanking. It's fine when the Astros did it. It was all funny when they're even cheating too. But now you're worried because the Braves got one? Like, get out of here.
Yeah.
That's my final thought. So thanks for listening. Or go ahead.
And I thought it was funny that it came from Boris. It was like, you're one of the people that's like negotiating these mega deals and helping people tank and everything else.
Well, that's why he's mad, because everyone the Braves had that has been good has been going to the Yankees, like going back to Teixeira. Like they're like going to the Yankees or the Red Sox or someone. It was, if you've traced them, they'd either go from the Pirates to the Braves, and then the Braves to one of those big market teams. It's like even the Cubs were signing some of them. Didn't they sign Frank Gore? It's like, yeah, that's what you get. That's what you get for those. So I don't know, but yeah, that's my main beef. But thanks for listening. We got plenty of football coming up. Get into some of the bowl game stuff, and hopefully the Steelers stay alive. They were really close to being eliminated, but we always have our Green Bay Packers, Matt. So we'll be keeping an eye on that as we close in on the season. So thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.